acquaintance, kinda hard to get a job back out on the block. Charge that to the game. Young girl, she grew up in a rush, had it bad, no doubt. She don't know who to trust. Every man she ever loved only wanna crush. Charge that to the game. But it's all gravy. Hey baby, shots get popped, the cops shut down the party. Jeans sag low, blow smoke out of the cheese. We've got love for y'all, which I don't love us. So it's living in suburban switching lanes. Spin the ball, I go in them chrome things. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Our kids and funny names. Don't hate on us, we're fabulous. Prepaid salaries for local calls. Yeah. Little dons and divas up at the mall. She was a dime, so naive that she believed every single lie. 17, first time slipped up, about to have a child. Charge that to the game. Was just us and mom, single parent home. She did the best she could, did it all alone. Met a man, but he won't raise a child that's not his own. Oh no, oh no, no. But it's all gravy. Hey baby, shots get popped, the cops shut down the party. Jeans sag low, blow smoke out of the cheese. We've got love for
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Dr. Joanne Hyppolite. I'm a curator here at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I have the pleasure, one of the areas that I focus on is food and foodways. Ever since I started here at the museum in 2014, I have known Dr. Jessica Harris because she's had such an incredible imprint on our museum here. If you don't know, Jessica developed the concept for our museum cafe when we first opened, and she was also very involved in the publication of our Sweet Home Cafe cookbook. So she's a good friend of the museum. But I'm going to read to you her official bio because tonight's program, right? Tonight we are talking about Kwanzaa and her latest cookbook. Dr. Jessica B. Harris is the author of 12 cookbooks documenting the foods and foodways of the African diaspora. She has lectured widely in the United States and abroad and has written extensively for scholarly and popular publications. She consults internationally for institutions like ours and the New York Botanical Garden, the Martha's Vineyard Museum, the Oxford Cultural Collective. And if you haven't heard, her book, High on the Hog, is the basis of the Netflix series of the same name. That won a Peabody Award and 2 NAACP Image Awards. Dr. Harris sits on the kitchen cabinet at the National Museum of American History, and in 2021, she was named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people. Bravo!
Which tells you how much Time Magazine knows, right?
We're here to talk about your latest cookbook and keepsake, A Kwanzaa Keepsake and Cookbook. Now, it's not brand new. It's an actually update of a book that you published in 1995.
Well,
I wanted to start with talking about that. Yeah.
I actually have gray hair, dark hair, and a long dead cat in the author photo on this one. And this one is gray hair and no kitty. So, so if you have this, you have kind of this, but there's some stuff in this that's not.
In it, you do a wonderful job of introducing Kwanzaa, so I thought we could talk a little bit about that first. Set it up for people who may not practice Kwanzaa here in the audience. We know that millions of people actually practice it around the world. So for those of us who are in the audience who are new to Kwanzaa, please share with us how and why the holiday came about.
I think the first thing about the holiday, Joanne, is it's relatively new. It was begun in 1966, which, you know, if you got a few barnacles on your bow, wasn't that long ago. So it was founded in 1966 by Maulana Karenga, who was a cultural nationalist. And so the interesting thing is it grew out of a matrix of nationalism, of African American nationalism. And from my reading and what I understand about it, it was designed to give us a time for a timeout. And Lord knows we need that now. So the idea was to just be able to take a pause in that time that is kind of sacred time in so many traditions. Diwali was early this year, but Diwali, if you're in Hindu faith, Hanukkah, and certainly Christmas. And so that idea, Ramadan is based on moon cycles, so it goes all year round, so it's not that particularly. But the point simply is that you can take an end of year time to say, okay, let me, if you want to think about it, Sankofa. Look back to see where you're going, kind of thing. So the idea of taking a time out is very much a part of Kwanzaa. And then the fact that it's the week between Christmas and New Year's expands it so that you've got all of those different things. Now, one of the things that Karenga came up with, which was fascinating and is very much the root of Kwanzaa, is the idea of the 7 principles. And the 7 principles, each day celebrates a different principle of nation building. And so the first day is Umoja, unity. The second day, and it took me forever to learn how to pronounce this, if I'm pronouncing it right now, Kujichagulia, self-determination. The third day, Ujima, collective work and responsibility. The fourth day, Ujamaa, cooperative economics. The 5th day, Nia, purpose. The 6th day, Kuumba, creativity. And the 7th and final day, Imani, faith. And so all of those days come together to make Kwanzaa. 7 is kind of the sacred number of Kwanzaa. There are also 7 different elements of what would be your Kwanzaa table. And I'm going to have to use my cheat sheet because I'm old and I can't remember anything. So forgive me. But you begin with the mzeo, the fruits and the vegetables of the harvest that are a part of the celebration table. Because it basically started out as a kind of accumulation and a distillation of multiple Eastern African harvest ceremonies. Then you get the mkeka, which is the placemat on which everything is arranged. The kinara, which is a 7-branched candlestick. Don't go out and buy a menorah, you'll be wrong. Menorahs have 9 branches, kinaras have 7. So it's a 7-branched candlesticks that hold the red, black, and green candles. And when I was first starting to celebrate Kwanzaa, finding those red, black, and green candles was half of the battle of the holiday. Then the candles are the Mushima Saba, and they are lighted each evening. You also have the Mohindi. On your mkeka, you have an ear of corn for every child in the household, because corn grows from corn, so that each ear of corn holds the potential for future corn. And so even if there are no children in the household, there's at least 1 ear of corn on your mat. And the kikombe cha umoja, or the chalice of unity, from which ceremonial libation is either poured or, in this post-COVID era, it may not be passed as it was in the past, but libation may simply be poured. And then, of course, because it is celebratory, the zawadi, or the gifts. And so 7 with 7, if you will, the 7 principles within.
And you do a wonderful job of laying it out and explaining it in the book. So for anyone who is new to Kwanzaa, it's the perfect, actually, introduction to beginning to learn about as well as potentially practice.
Thank you.
No, it really is. So
I pay her for
1966,
that.
1966. So when did you first become aware of Kwanzaa yourself and
Honestly,
start practicing it or, you know, engage with it?
I mean, I think I came late to it. I actually have a first cousin. If any of you are from Brooklyn, Ya Santua is my cousin. But she may have been at the first Kwanzaa ceremony. I'm not sure, but she was very much earlier to it than I was. I was a member of a Yoruba religious community in Brooklyn, and they celebrated Kwanzaa. And that was kind of how I got involved with it. And it was like, oh, this makes sense. You know, this makes sense. This is important. I don't have children. I think I might have come to Kwanzaa earlier if I'd had children.
Right.
Because I think it's very much about an educational process as well that works so well with children. So I think there's part of that.
Yeah, and we talked about you expanding about a little bit about that today, about how much Kwanzaa is a family holiday, right? In which children are very much engaged in and taught the principles and learn how to practice them by actually actualizing some of the principles through the gifts that they give or through the activities that you have, for instance, in the book.
And the way they engage, the way they engage. I'm gonna be sort of self-referential, and this is what I say, so this part of the book you don't have to read, you'll hear. Kwanzaa is essentially a family holiday, whether it be nuclear family, extended family, or communal family. Each evening of the holiday, family members gathered around the celebration table to read the 7 principles and to meditate on the principle of the day, while the leader of the ceremony lights one of the candles. Visitors are asked to participate in as the nightly ceremony is held. The candles are lighted and libation is poured or sipped from the communal cup. Now, for me, there are many different kinds of Kwanzaa, and there are as many different kinds of Kwanzaa as there are types of family in the Black American community. We are known for our improvisation. Our virtuoso turns have created musical forms that have made the entire world sing and dance. Our artistic endeavors have redefined Western art forms. So whether we have stepped and stopped, our transformational and improvisational skills have changed the country and the hemisphere. Our expressions are found in domains as wide-ranging as cooking, certainly I write about that, music and language, to mention but a few. In our world, there's always room for improvisation. It would be impossible for us not to improvise on the themes of Kwanzaa. So, we ring in the changes and create new riffs on our own holiday. There are single Kwanzaas celebrated by individuals with friends and neighbors. Nuclear family Kwanzaas with mommy, daddy, and baby gathering each evening to light the candles. There are single parent Kwanzaas, extended family Kwanzaas, neighborhood Kwanzaas, community Kwanzaas, and even workplace Kwanzaas. For more than a decade, I was mistress of ceremonies at a Kwanzaa celebration hosted by the Africana Studies Department at Queens College, CUNY in New York. And each year, that celebration grew and offered the Black faculty and staff a chance to get together. And even though it was sponsored by the Africana Studies Department, and I'm ad-libbing now, I'm not reading, just to let you know what actually happened, because it was faculty, and because faculty wanted to have a little libation that was a little more potent than would have been allowed had there been students, it was a faculty Kwanzaa. So there are multiple different kinds of Kwanzaa. But with the faculty Kwanzaa, the Black faculty and staff had a chance to get together and to remind the institution and ourselves that we were there. So each Kwanzaa ceremony brings something new to the kaleidoscope of possibilities that is the holiday.
Beautiful, thank you. So before I came today, my son and I were talking about Christmas gifts. I said, I know what I'm getting you for Christmas. Oh, I don't get to choose what I want for Christmas, you know? We had this argument about where I wanted to spend my money and where he wanted to spend his money, and I have this philosophy this year that I want to put it in artists' hands, right? Rather than go out and pay Amazon more money for things that they can deliver to the house. Do you think that Kwanzaa offers an alternative to the commercialization of Christmas?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, I think that was part of the reason for its founding. You know, Christmas has gotten out of hand and off the rails.
Yeah.
Ironically, from 1966 to the present, kind of so has Kwanzaa. But the idea at inception was, let's make gifts. Let's buy black. Let's celebrate our own history. Let's shop in the community. Let's do all of those things that were a part of just that, the whole idea of cultural nationalism. So although some, you know, we got a stamp now, although some of that has expanded and moved forward, that's still very much, for me, and I think for many people who celebrate Kwanzaa, part of the matrix of the holiday. Right. That's the bedrock. You know, shop maybe where you live. You can't even say that anymore, but shop where your heart is. You know, shop where your heart is.
Yeah, so we'll see where it ends up with my son and I this year. Who wins that battle?
Well, he's going away to college. You might have to cut him a little slack.
Okay.
Just a little.
One of the other beauties of the book is how much you've internationalized, or diasporized, if I can say it that way, Kwanzaa, right? We often think of Kwanzaa because they're using the Swahili language and a lot of African principles, and the foundation of it being really African-based. But you have brought in the Caribbean, you have brought in South America, you have brought in the rest of the Black diaspora as well. I want you to tell us, first of all, how you became this person who knows the Black diaspora so well, because you've written so many books that have talked about food and so many different cuisines, like how you became introduced to that and why you felt that was important for this book.
Well, I mean, I think, honestly, I think there is power in connectedness. If you feel that you are all by yourself, out here doing stuff that nobody's done or that there's no parallel for, you're isolated. But if you look around and go, oh, well, damn, Skippy, you got the same problem. Or, I didn't know you had that too. Then there's power in that. Then there is community in that. Then there is growth in that. It has been my great good fortune. I had a girlfriend whose birthday it is today who was posting something and said, oh my God, I'm 52. This is the last day of my 52nd year. And I wrote her back and said, child, I got bunions older than that, stop. So the point is that in the course of my career, I've been fortunate in that I've been able to travel. What's the name, Johanna, of the exhibit? In Slavery's Wake, which is going to open next week across the hall. I was fortunate enough to kind of get a sneak preview of. The thing that is impassioning for me about the diaspora is, oh my God, we are so connected. Cuban poet Nicolas Guillen has a poem called Mi Apellido, My Last Name is the English translation. And in it, he says, we will know each other by the fragments of chains in our eyes. Shakespeare, in The Tempest, has a riff that Ariel does at the beginning. It's full fathom 5, thy father lies, of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Nothing that was his doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. Now, African-American jazz poet Robert Hayden takes that and does what I was talking about us doing, inverts it, uplifts it, and transforms it in a poem he's written called Middle Passage. And he says, "Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones New England pews are made. Nothing," oh, those are altar lights that were his eyes. "Nothing that was his doth change, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange." So that extraordinary sea change, going from the African continent to not just the United States, but this hemisphere, is something that I have been fortunate enough to see a lot of. I mean, I have danced in the candomblé rings in Salvador de Bahia. You know, I have been up in the hills hanging, you know, the dog in the back of the car that does that. I've been doing that, sniffing along, trying to look for lechon up in the mountains over San Juan in Puerto Rico. I have kind of eaten through a lot of this hemisphere. And the thing that always strikes me is just how connected we are. And so in terms of this, and every night in the formation of the book, I initially, in the original book, included 4 bios of people that I thought represented the principle for that day. This redoing of it, I'm calling it a refresh. It's not a new book. If you've got the old book, you can compare and contrast. Some of the recipes are slightly tweaked, and only slightly. But the old book, the one I held up earlier, has a bio from the African continent, a bio from Brazil, a bio from the Caribbean, and a bio from the United States. The new book has those bios that have in some places been revised, and all of the bios are for people who have become ancestors, because it's like, I want to deal with somebody, go, why didn't you include this one and you didn't? So they're all ancestors. The new one includes 1 LGBTQ plus person, because I thought it was important that we widen the net and bring everybody into the tent. So, so that's part of it. And I've got one that I'm gonna maybe read, let's see. Recently, as in last month, I was in Sapelo. Some of you may have read about that horrific ferry accident. There was a Gullah Geechee festival on Sapelo in November, and or late October, November, I'm not sure. And Sapelo is an out island. It would be called an out island in the Bahamas. It's part of the Low Country. You can only reach Sapelo by a ferry that arrives 3 times a day. So as the ferry was departing from this island that is its own magical, mysterious, haunting, and haunted place, there was an accident on the dock, and 7 elders drowned. Wow. And we haven't heard an awful lot about it. We might not. But Sapelo is something we should think about, and please remember those Gullah Geechee elders in your prayers if you pray, and in your thoughts if you think. Anyhow, this is about someone that we learn more about each day. It is on the final night, and the people that I saluted on the final night were Amenhotep, Akhenaten of Egypt, who was a pharaoh, we're told, 1379 to 1362 BC. Agochime of Brazil, who was the late 18th and early 19th century. The thing about Agochime is she was a princess from the country that was called Dahomey, the country in the belly of Dan that then became Dahomey, that is now today Benin. not where the Benin bronzes are from, but the country known as Benin. She was captured and became enslaved in São Luís de Maranhão in Brazil. So she's the other person I talk about. Robert Nesta Marley. Remember, this is the day of faith.
Right.
So Bob Marley, faith. The thing that I added was the candomblé tradition of Bahia for LGBTQ plus people, because it is an accepting religion. And then this is the person that was for the United States, 19th century, Ben Ali Muhammad. No one knows very much about Ben Ali Muhammad, better known as Bilali Muhammad. But it is thought he was brought to the plantation of a man named Thomas Spalding on Sapelo Island in Georgia from Nassau in the Bahamas. Because he is said to have spoken French, that there are those that believe that before living in Nassau, he had been enslaved somewhere in the French-speaking West Indies. Bilali Muhammad was different from the other black people of his area. In fact, he distinguished himself so much that others recalled him and his ways in their oral witness to the trials of slavery. These testimonies reveal that Bilali Muhammad was a man who ate food that was prepared differently from that of the others. He prostrated himself to pray at sunup and sundown, and he wore a fez-like cap. He had many children, and they too were different. They had names like Bintu, Medina, and Fatima. Nothing much else survived about Bilali except in the memories of his descendants and those who knew him, until the Georgia State Library received a document in 1930 that was thought to be his journal, written in what seemed to be Arabic. Perplexed, they attempted to decipher the text to no avail. Finally, after the text had been taken to African Islamic scholars, a discovery was made. The work that Ben Ali Muhammad had written was his transcription of the Risala, a legal text written by Abu Muhammad Abdullah bin Abi Zaid of Kairouan, the Islamic University town in what is now Tunisia. In particular, Muhammad had transcribed the introduction and sections dealing with ablutions and the call to prayer. The confusion came because, like others taken from Africa, Ben Ali Muhammad took with him only what he had stored in his mind. He had transcribed the text from memory, the memory of a young African Quranic student decades earlier. What better testimony is there to the power of Imani faith?
Indeed. Thank you. So we're going to talk about food, some of which we are going to be eating right after the program tonight, right?
Yeah, because we have little tastes.
We have some tastes from the menu and from the cookbook. But I want to let you all know that I'm going to be opening up the floor to questions in just a few minutes as well. And there are microphones on the sides of the room, and that's where you'll come up and you'll ask your questions. But let's talk about food. How important is food to Kwanzaa? What extent?
For me, it's cardinal, it's crucial, it's essential. I mean, you know, we are people who eat. We show love by giving people food. We commune over food. You know, food are us. Mm-hmm. You know, we celebrate by it. I think that food is, for me, and certainly remember I talked about how Kwanzaa is individualized in many cases. Mm-hmm. My riff on Kwanzaa, if you will, is about food. Mm. So the book is actually a cookbook. It's got a recipe meal for every night. And so the recipes came out of my travels in the diaspora. I was saying, I think to you earlier today, that it's kind of funny because I've written those 12 cookbooks that you talked about, or 11 cookbooks and High on the Hog. But out of them all, Kwanzaa and the recipes in it are probably the things I'm most likely to cook for dinner. They are not my researched recipes per se. They are my, oh yeah, I feel like eating this tonight recipes kind of thing. So in that sense, they are different. They are my, oh yeah, I feel like eating this recipes that come out of a matrix of my travels. But they are probably more indicative of the way I cook than some of the other books might be.
That's interesting. Oh, and y'all, I think you all have cards actually that you're writing questions on, not the microphone. The plans changed along the way in the evening. So please do pass your questions to the end of the aisle. There are people walking up and down to collect them. So some of the foods we'll be tasting outside, right? We're having that orzo with almonds, right?
Okay, well, the orzo with almonds is very simple. I used to be, this is a confession over a microphone, I make the world's worst rice. I couldn't cook rice to save my life. I would, food critic coming from the New York Times, and I'm there with minute rice. It was not pretty. It was really not pretty. So orzo was my solution. Orzo is a rice-shaped pasta. I would do orzo, and I would do with the orzo what I might have by the way, I can cook rice now. But and it's an interesting story. After my mother, who I have not yet referenced this time on the stage, but was a registered dietitian and an amazing cook. I mean, she had the taste buds. I am a pale imitation. But she always cooked rice like pasta. And I remember at one, actually, Kwanzaa meal, because I used to do I didn't even realize it was Kwanzaa, but it was a gathering. I would assemble friends to meet my family. And so at this particular gathering, my mother was standing by the stove making, or watching, I guess, Sarah Moulton make rice. And she said, "Oh, Ma, you cook it like me, you cook it like pasta." So a year or two after my mother died, I was standing at the stove, and I heard her voice, "Cook it like pasta." So that's how I started doing it, and now I make acceptable rice. I don't know that it's the best rice in the world, but it's acceptable rice. So the orzo comes from my cheating days, and it's served with slivered almonds, so it's sort of like a pilaf or a pilau, so it's a little bit like that.
So tell us about the sources of the recipes in the cookbook. Where did you, how did you end up selecting them? Where did you come from? Did they come from friends and family?
Yeah, friends, family, and rank experimentation. There are several salads. I didn't label any of the recipes, so I'm going to just flip. But, okay, on the first night, we've got seasoned olives. And that basically is, I play with stuff. I can't leave stuff alone. I apologize. But so it's black olives or green olives. I think in this case it was ripe olives. It's just a can of drained ripe olives. But if you add dried thyme, minced garlic, minced chili, and a little olive oil and let it sit, and marinate and refresh itself anew, you've got something that's pretty nice to serve as an appetizer to a meal. We also have pan-roasted almonds, and the almonds that I found a trick to is you get the almonds with the skins on them. I blanch those and slip the skins off. And then you've got that white almond kernel, which I then toast in a cast iron skillet until they get really brown, kind of crunchy, tasty, and then just salt, So that's how this meal starts. I tend to make my salads with fruit. I like fruit in my salad. Everybody doesn't. If you don't, this is not a recipe for you. But this is fresh greens with avocado and raspberry. Okay, and so it's just the, the greens that you'd get in the, greengrocers. Boston lettuce, if you've got Boston lettuce, arugula, if you've got arugula. These are all very forgiving recipes. So a small sweet onion cut crosswise into very thin slices, 2 avocados cut into 1-inch cubes, and a half a cup of fresh raspberries.
Yeah.
The dressing then is soy sauce, rice vinegar, and sesame oil. So you get a little of the nuttiness from the sesame oil that's going with the soy and the vinegar, and a little bit of sugar. So you've got a kind of sweet thing that takes up the sweetness of the...
Can I say that I was surprised to learn from this book that you do not like dessert? And thank you for including desserts in the book, even though you do not like them.
Well, I was trying to do meals.
Yes, That's always been the case for you, huh? Sweets are not your palate.
Well, I don't want to say sweets are not it, but I mean, my sweet tastes were arrested in probably the 3rd grade. I can go face down in a bag of gummy bears. But I am okay without chocolate. I don't crave chocolate, but don't let me get in a room with gummy bears, jelly beans, all of those things that will pull out my fillings. Yeah, I want all of those.
Yeah, and we'll be having gingerbread tonight. I think that's one.
Well, the gingerbread is kind of, for this book and for me, my totemic recipe of all of it. It's a hot water gingerbread, which is kind of more old-fashioned gingerbread. It is not the kind of gingerbread you'd make a gingerbread house out of. It's not that sort of crunchy gingerbread. It is more like a bread. It's more like the classic, what was a gingerbread in Europe. And this book came out originally in 1995. And as was the case and as still is the case when you write cookbooks and you're showing up at a radio show or a television show, they expect you to bring food. So I was like, oh, Lord, what am I going to bring? What am I going to bring? So I thought, okay, I'll bring some gingerbread. Well, the place I was going was Betty Shabazz. May she rest in peace. And it was Betty Shabazz's radio show. She had a talk radio show in New York back then. And Betty Shabazz, Dr. Betty Shabazz, to give her full props, was Malcolm X's widow. And so I brought this gingerbread and had it all there ready to serve. And she took a piece of it and she said, oh my goodness, I haven't thought of that in years. This was Malcolm's favorite. I used to make it for him. And so I can't think of that recipe now without thinking of that story that goes with it.
Yeah, that's I would love to have a whole cookbook on just some of our, our leaders and our activists, our many people, and what they love to eat, right?
Yeah.
And what they love to make. Yeah.
One of Malcolm's would be that. I don't know about Baldwin, but I think Baldwin's thing was hot sauce.
Ooh.
Hot sauce.
Like all of us, we have hot sauce in the cafe, y'all.
Hot sauce.
We have a comment here from someone, so many delicious recipes in the book. Which one most embodies Kwanzaa to you? That's a hard question, I bet.
Most embodies Kwanzaa. I don't even know. Let me just check this because I have to look and check. Thank you for whoever asked that question. Okay. For me, it might be a southern succotash. Okra, corn, and tomatoes.
Yeah.
Because I serve that every year at my Kwanzaa thing. And anybody who knows me knows that okra is my big, big thing. It's on my stationery. I've got it everywhere. So a dish with okra would be appropriate for me. I think we're getting ready. I see the timekeeper getting ready to flash a card. But I just want to talk about two other things in the book that we haven't gotten to yet. It's called A Kwanzaa Keepsake, which was the original title, and it's a keepsake because the book is designed to be used as a keepsake. There are blank pages that you're supposed to fill in, okay? I once read some graduate student in the UK was writing about a Kwanzaa keepsake, Lord only knows why, and had developed this whole convoluted theory about why there were blank pages. It's like, it's simple. You're supposed to fill them in. They are called the griots pages, and they are designed for, every family has a griot. Every family has somebody in the family who knows everybody's birthday, who knows, you know, where this is, where that is, the phone numbers, where the great aunts are, where the great granddaddy really came from, and all of that. So these pages, which are either called family pages or the griots pages, and they're just blank pages.
Right.
They are for you, the reader, to write your family history, write a recipe. The book also has projects. So there are all kinds of crazy projects. Do a family cookbook. Make, what else? Teaching, sharing. You know, one night I suggest you take all of the menu that you're going to prepare and do double portions, double the portion, and give one portion away and take your youngsters with you so they understand sharing and the importance of working together and alleviating hunger together to the degree that one can. The thing that I did for the night of creativity, Kuumba, which is the second night and the night of the Karamu feast, is I created an African-American healing supper.
That's powerful right now.
And, you know, the thing about, well, I'll read this or some of this. At old revival meetings, preachers would lean over the pulpit and holler, "We need a healing here tonight." Indeed, in our communities, in our families, in our relationships, and in ourselves, we need a healing. I've taken the sixth night of Kwanzaa, the night of Kuumba or creativity, to attempt to begin that process with a communal meal that opens the gates of remembrance through food and speaks of our history, our past, and our hopes for the future. I call it a healing supper. The format is loosely based on the Jewish Haggadah that accompanies the Passover feasts and celebrates the Jewish people getting out of bondage in Egypt. The supper can be moved to any night of Kwanzaa or indeed to any other time of the year that you, your family, or your community feels the need for a healing. The healing supper is designed to take us back over the centuries in remembrance of our journey that began in sorrow and ends with the vision of a new day. We can do this seated around our tables at home or anywhere we can gather together to share a meal in remembrance and celebration. So it is a sort of scripted meal that talks about getting out of bondage. It talks about the middle passage. It talks about going forth and growing together.
Thank you for that. Perfect, perfect way to close. I couldn't any better than that. So, Jessica Harris will be outside signing books out there, and there for you to be able to speak to, and the food will also be served outside. What did she say? Food are us. Go out there and enjoy the meal, and all of it's been taken from the Keepsake book. And happy Kwanzaa, happy holidays to all of you.
And I think we've done the Q&A already. Thank you. No. The signkeeper was saying Q&A, but those of you who passed your Qs have hopefully gotten your A's.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Are there any more questions? No. Okay. Great.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming out on this cold night.
Yes.
And Ms. Harris, Dr. Harris can also personalize